Ever since the Thunder traded for Paul George last summer, this offseason had been the cloud hanging over their heads. As rumors swirled of George's resolve to move to LA and sign with his hometown team, they watched from afar as Victor Oladipo turned into a star. Yet somehow, against the odds, the Thunder will enter 2018-19 a deeper and more talented team than they ended last season. Almost before free agency began, George had gone against expectations and re-signed with Oklahoma City for 4 more seasons. As Russell Westbrook's celebratory party in George's honor showed, the decision created palpable relief throughout the organization. George was the key to the offseason. Without him, nothing else would have mattered, but the Thunder continued to build on that success. Their next move was to retain Jerami Grant for 3 years, $27.3 million. Grant was quietly very good for OKC last season, thriving as a two-way forward, an occasional small ball center, while doing all the little things. They then brought in Nerlens Noel as a low-risk, high-reward flyer to shore up the frontcourt depth. There is still a lot to be determined regarding Noel's role this season, but the fit makes a ton of sense. If Noel can translate his raw potential into actual NBA production, his length will perfectly complement the power of Steven Adams. The true sea change this summer came a few weeks later, however, as Oklahoma City agreed to send Carmelo Anthony and a 2022 first-round pick to Atlanta for Dennis Schroeder. As OKC's bill was creeping up near $300 million, tax savings became the true impetus for the trade. The clearest path would have been to stretch Anthony's contract, but GM Sam Presti found Plan B and not only saved ownership over $70 million, but added a talented young point guard who will help the Thunder win games this season. At a minimum, OKC now has one of the best bench players in the league. For a team that finished 29th in bench points per game last season, Schroeder filling the Westbrook role with the second unit is valuable. He'd be great in that role, but limiting him to the 12-ish minutes per game Westbrook is on the bench would be a waste. The real key to Schroeder's success in OKC is how he learns to play alongside the 2017 MVP. Both players are extremely ball-dominant. Over 75% of each player's field goals came unassisted last season, and neither is a particularly dangerous off-ball threat. The fit isn't perfect, but as the top 2 players on that list would attest, they can make it work. Finding a way to be successful in the minutes he's on the court alongside Westbrook will be the defining factor in Schroeder's success, or lack thereof, in Oklahoma City. While OKC's public connotation will always be Westbrook's unrelenting athleticism, the identity of the team is their defense. Where Anthony represented a glaring defensive weak spot last season, the Thunder can now fill those minutes with solid defenders like Grant, Noel, and Patrick Patterson. The true X-factor for OKC's defense on season as a whole, though, is the health and availability of Andre Roberson. When Roberson was on the court last season, the Thunder were defensively dominant. He had the second highest defensive real plus-minus in the league, and the Thunder put up a stifling 96. For DRTG in his minutes. Approaching the All-Star break, Oklahoma City had the league's 5th best defense, and Roberson had emerged as a bona fide Defensive Player of the Year candidate. The Thunder were finding their groove and starting to look like a potential threat to Golden State and Houston, but then Roberson ruptured his left patellar tendon on January 27. With Roberson lost for the season, the Thunder weren't the same team. Westbrook and George had begun to find a real offensive rhythm, but it didn't matter. They didn't have the defensive identity they needed to compete in the playoffs. Roberson is still in the process of rehabbing his injury and has set Christmas as a target date to be back to 100%. The Thunder would love him back to 100% as soon as possible, but they know they need him truly healthy for the playoffs. Roberson's defensive ability is well understood, but his greatest value comes as a part of OKC's best weapons against the Warriors and Rockets of the world. When the Thunder play their best defensive lineups, they're nearly impossible to score against. Westbrook, George, Adams, Roberson, and Grant, or now potentially Noel, are so long, athletic and versatile that they can create problems for even the best defensive lineups in the league. Those lineups have fundamental problems scoring, but last season the Grant version had an unbelievable DRTG of 79. 6. If there is one concern for Roberson this season, excluding health, it's on the offensive side of the ball. Roberson's shooting woes are well documented, but he has developed a moderately effective game by operating from the corner and sneaking to the basket for putbacks or hard cutting for lobs. His injury came on this exact type of play. The problem is that style of play really only works with good offensive spacing around him. Although Anthony wasn't efficient last season, his reputation carried enough gravity to create space for Roberson and the other Thunder players. Defenses will continue to key in on Westbrook and George, but without Anthony or many other floor spacing options, it will be very difficult for Roberson to find the space he needs to have an offensive impact. In order for the Thunder to be successful this season, they are going to need Roberson on the floor. His health will make or break OKC's defense and, in turn, their playoff hopes. Westbrook and George will have to play at an all-star level and continue the offensive rhythm they found at the end of last season, but Roberson will be the deciding factor in whether OKC can achieve their goals and compete for a title this season.